The moment I saw Sharon Peterson standing in my driveway at 5:30 in the morning, I knew my peaceful life in Mountain Ridge, Colorado was about to get a whole lot more complicated. I had just gotten home from working the night shift at the warehouse, my body aching and my eyes burning from exhaustion, when her shrill voice cut through the crisp morning air like a knife through butter. She was bundled up in a designer parka that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, her perfectly styled blonde hair barely moving in the freezing wind. "Tyler Walsh, I need to speak with you immediately." Her voice carried that particular tone that only HOA board presidents seem to master, the one that suggests they believe they own not just the neighborhood but your very soul. I climbed out of my truck, my work boots crunching on the gravel. "Sharon, it's not even 6 in the morning. Can this wait?" "No, it cannot wait." She marched up to me, clutching a folder against her chest. "The board had an emergency meeting last night and we have decided that your snow plowing services are inadequate." I stared at her, wondering if I was so tired I was hallucinating. Inadequate. I've been plowing the neighborhood streets for 3 winters now. I've never missed a storm, never been late, and I charge less than any professional service would. Sharon's lips pursed into a thin line. "That may be true, but the board has decided we need more proactive service. Starting immediately, you are required to begin plowing no later than 4:30 in the morning on any day when snow accumulation is expected to exceed 1 inch. 4:30. Sharon, most storms don't even start until after that. Half the time, I'd be plowing nothing. The board has spoken." She thrust the folder at me. "Here are your new guidelines. Failure to comply will result in a fine of $500 per incident and termination of your contract after 3 violations." I took the folder, more out of shock than agreement. "You can't be serious." "I am deadly serious, Tyler. Mrs. Henderson slipped on her driveway 2 weeks ago because there was a light dusting of snow that you had not cleared by 7 in the morning. That was her private driveway. I only do the neighborhood streets. Private driveways are the homeowner's responsibility, and that's been in the contract since day one." Sharon's face flushed red. "Don't you dare raise your voice at me. The board has made its decision. You will comply, or you will face the consequences." She turned on her heel and marched back to her oversized SUV, leaving me standing there in the cold with a folder full of absurd demands. I looked down at the papers, flipping through page after page of new requirements. 4:30 start time, regardless of actual snow accumulation. Mandatory second passes by 7 in the morning. Immediate response to any homeowner complaint, verified or not. And the kicker was that they weren't offering a single extra dollar for all these additional demands. I trudged inside my small ranch house, tossed the folder on the kitchen table and collapsed into bed. But sleep wouldn't come. My mind kept churning over Sharon's demands. I had taken on the snow plowing contract 3 years ago when I first moved to Mountain Ridge, thinking it would be an easy way to make some extra money during the winter months. The subdivision had 42 homes spread across a network of residential streets, and I could usually clear everything in about 3 hours with my plow attachment. It had been good money, and the original contract had been reasonable. I plowed after storms, keeping the streets passable and safe. But over the past year, ever since Sharon Peterson had been elected HOA president, things had gotten progressively worse. First, it was complaints about how I stacked the snow. Then it was demands for more frequent plowing during heavy storms. Now this. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, and something inside me just snapped. I was 32 years old, working 60 hours a week between my warehouse job and the plowing, barely making ends meet, and taking grief from someone who probably spent more on coffee each month than I made from the entire plowing contract. I was tired. Tired of the complaints, tired of the unreasonable demands, tired of being treated like hired help instead of a neighbor doing a service. I grabbed my phone and started typing out an email to the HOA board. To the Mountain Ridge HOA board, effective immediately, I am terminating my snow plowing contract. Per Section 7 of our agreement, I am providing notice that I will no longer be providing these services. You have 30 days to find a replacement, though I will not be available for any plowing during that period, as allowed under the emergency termination clause. Good luck finding someone willing to meet your new requirements. Tyler Walsh. I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then rolled over and finally fell asleep. The pounding on my door woke me 4 hours later. I stumbled out of bed, still in my work clothes, and opened the door to find Sharon standing there again, this time with 2 other board members flanking her. I recognized them as Robert and Patricia Jennings, a retired couple who lived 3 streets over. "You cannot quit." Sharon's face was purple with rage. "We have a contract." I rubbed my eyes. "A contract that you just violated by unilaterally changing the terms without my agreement." I read Section 12 last night before I went to sleep. Any changes to service requirements need to be mutually agreed upon in writing. You tried to force new terms, so I invoked the emergency termination clause. Robert stepped forward, his voice more measured than Sharon's. "Tyler, please. Can we discuss this reasonably? We need a snow plower." "Then you should have thought about that before demanding I start work at 4:30 in the morning for the same pay." Patricia spoke up, her tone conciliatory. "What if we remove that requirement? Can we start fresh?" Sharon whirled on her. "We will do no such thing. The board voted and the decision stands. Mr. Walsh is just being difficult. If he refuses to honor his contract, we will sue him." I looked at Sharon steadily. "Go ahead. You'll lose. I know my rights, and I had a lawyer look over that contract before I signed it." "You violated it first. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to get ready for work." I closed the door on Sharon's sputtering protests and headed for the shower. By the time I got out, they were gone, but my phone was full of text messages and voicemails. I ignored them all. Over the next 3 days, the messages continued. Sharon called a special HOA meeting, which I didn't attend. She sent certified letters threatening legal action. She even tried to get other neighbors to pressure me, but I held firm. I was done. The funny thing was, I had been thinking about leaving Mountain Ridge anyway. The cost of living in Colorado had skyrocketed over the past few years, and my modest income wasn't keeping pace. My lease at the warehouse was ending in a month, and I had been casually looking at job opportunities in other states. Sharon's demands had simply accelerated my timeline. By the end of the first week, I had applied for a warehouse supervisor position in Billings, Montana. The pay was better, the cost of living was lower, and most importantly, there was no HOA where I was looking at houses. By the end of the second week, I had a job offer and had put my house on the market. By the end of the third week, I had a buyer who was willing to close fast, and I was packing my belongings. The weather forecast predicted a major storm for the first week of December, just 2 days before my closing date. I watched the forecast with grim satisfaction. Sharon and the board still hadn't found a replacement plower. I knew this because I had friends in the neighborhood who kept me updated. Apparently, every professional snow removal service in the area had either laughed at the HOA's requirements or quoted prices 3 times what they were paying me. The storm hit on a Thursday night. I was already mostly packed, my house full of boxes, my plow attachment sitting unused in the garage. I watched through my window as the snow began to fall, light at first, then heavier and heavier as the night progressed. By midnight, there were already 4 inches on the ground. By 3 in the morning, when I got up to use the bathroom, it was closer to 8 inches and still coming down hard. My phone buzzed at 4 in the morning. It was a text from Sharon. Emergency situation. Will pay double rate for immediate plowing. I deleted it and went back to bed. At 5, there was pounding on my door. I ignored it. At 6, my phone rang continuously for 20 minutes straight. I turned it off. By the time I finally got up at 9, there was over a foot of snow on the ground, and the storm showed no signs of stopping. I made coffee and looked out my window at the chaos unfolding in the neighborhood. Cars were stuck in driveways, unable to even back out onto the unplowed streets. I could see Sharon's SUV attempting to navigate the snow and sliding sideways into a snowbank. People were out with shovels, trying to clear enough space just to move their vehicles. It was absolute pandemonium. My doorbell rang. I opened it to find Patricia Jennings standing there, looking exhausted and desperate. "Tyler, please. People can't get to work. The ambulance couldn't get through to the Thompson house this morning when Mr. Thompson had chest pains. They had to walk 2 blocks through the snow to reach him. Someone could die because of this. Then maybe the board shouldn't have driven away the person who was willing to plow for a reasonable rate with reasonable terms," I said, not unkindly. "Patricia, I'm sorry, but this isn't my problem anymore. I told you all 3 weeks ago that I was done." "Sharon was wrong," Patricia said quietly. "We all know she was wrong. But she's stubborn, and she convinced Robert and me that you were just bluffing, that you'd come back when you were needed. I don't bluff. I can see that now." She looked down at her boots, snow melting around them onto my doormat. "What would it take? Money. We'll pay anything." "It's not about money, Patricia. It's about respect. Sharon treated me like property, like she owned me and could dictate whatever terms she wanted. I'm a human being and I deserve to be treated like one. That ship has sailed. I close on this house tomorrow and I'm moving to Montana on Sunday." Her eyes widened. "You're leaving, but you've lived here for 3 years. 3 years too long, as it turns out. You should probably call a professional service. Even at their rates, it's better than nothing. We tried. None of them can come until Monday at the earliest. They're all dealing with the storm in other areas." I shrugged. "Then I guess the board will have to figure something out. Maybe Sharon can plow it herself." Patricia left, and I went back to my packing. The storm continued throughout the day, adding another 6 inches by evening. The neighborhood was completely impassable. I saw on the local news that Mountain Ridge was one of several subdivisions in the area experiencing problems due to lack of snow removal. The reporter interviewed Sharon, who tried to spin it as an unexpected emergency that no one could have anticipated, conveniently leaving out the part about driving away their regular plower with insane demands. Friday morning arrived cold and clear. The storm had passed, leaving nearly 20 inches of snow in its wake. My closing was at 10, and I had arranged for a friend with a 4-wheel drive truck to pick me up and take me to the title company. As we were leaving, I saw Sharon standing in her driveway, looking at the disaster of her neighborhood. She saw me and started marching through the snow toward my house. "You did this on purpose," she screamed. "You knew this storm was coming and you abandoned us." "I quit 3 weeks ago, Sharon." "You had 3 weeks to find someone else. The weather forecast only predicted this storm 5 days ago. That's not my problem. I'll sue you for damages. The HOA will take everything you have." My lawyer friend, Jason, who had come along for the closing, stepped forward. "I wouldn't recommend that, Mrs. Peterson. My client fulfilled his obligations under the contract. You violated it first by attempting to unilaterally modify the terms. Any lawsuit you file will be quickly dismissed, and you might find yourself on the hook for legal fees." Sharon's face went from red to purple. "This isn't over. Actually, it is," I said. "After today, I won't live here anymore. Good luck with your neighborhood." The closing went smoothly. By noon, I was no longer a resident of Mountain Ridge. I spent the weekend finishing my packing, staying at a hotel since the house was now someone else's property. On Sunday morning, I loaded up my truck and started the drive to Montana. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. 2 weeks into my new job in Billings, I received a certified letter from a law firm in Colorado. Sharon and the HOA were indeed suing me, claiming I had abandoned my duties during an emergency and seeking damages for the costs of emergency snow removal, plus compensation for various homeowners who had suffered losses due to the unplowed streets. The total they were seeking was $35,000. I called Jason immediately. "This is ridiculous," he said after I read him the complaint. "Don't worry about it. Send me all your documentation and I'll handle it." "Jason, I can't afford a legal battle right now. I just moved, I have a new job, and I'm barely getting settled." "You won't need to. Trust me. This case is so frivolous it'll be dismissed quickly. In fact, I'm going to countersue for harassment and legal fees." Jason was true to his word. He filed a response that methodically destroyed every claim the HOA made. He included the original contract, the email threads showing Sharon's unilateral demands, my resignation letter, and the timeline proving I had given proper notice. He also included statements from several Mountain Ridge residents who were willing to testify that the HOA board had been unreasonable. The case went before a judge in January. I had to drive back to Colorado for the hearing, which annoyed me, but Jason assured me it would be worth it. The courtroom was small, and Sharon showed up with the HOA's lawyer, a tired-looking man who seemed like he knew he was fighting a losing battle. Jason presented our case clearly and concisely. The judge, a woman in her 50s named Judge Morrison, looked increasingly irritated as Sharon's lawyer tried to argue that I had a moral obligation to continue service during an emergency. "Counselor," Judge Morrison said, cutting him off mid-sentence. "Are you seriously arguing that your client can unilaterally change a contract, and then when the other party exercises their legal right to terminate, they're still somehow obligated? Your Honor, the safety of the community was at stake." The safety of the community was the responsibility of the HOA board, who had 3 weeks to find alternative arrangements. From what I see here, they chose to do nothing, apparently believing they could force Mr. Walsh to continue working under terms he never agreed to. She looked at Sharon. "Mrs. Peterson, is it true you told Mr. Walsh he was required to begin plowing at 4:30 in the morning, regardless of actual weather conditions?" Sharon stood up. "Your Honor, we need reliable service. Mr. Walsh was being paid good money, and he should have been willing to meet reasonable requirements." "Reasonable?" Judge Morrison's eyebrows rose. "You wanted him to wake up at 4 in the morning, possibly plow nothing if the storm hadn't started yet, come back for a second pass a few hours later, and you offered no additional compensation for these demands. He was already being paid. He was being paid for the original contract terms which you violated. Mrs. Peterson, has your HOA board found a replacement plowing service?" Sharon hesitated. "We have retained Mountain West snow removal." "And what are they charging?" Another hesitation. $400 per plowing event." "Per event? And what were you paying Mr. Walsh per event?" $150. Judge Morrison leaned back. So you're now paying nearly 3 times as much for the same service because you refuse to honor the original contract with Mr. Walsh. Do they have special requirements? They plow starting at 6 in the morning after accumulation exceeds 2 inches. So they have worse terms than what you were trying to force on Mr. Walsh, and they cost more than twice as much. Interesting business decision. The judge turned to Jason. Counselor, I'm dismissing the HOA's claim with prejudice. Furthermore, I'm awarding your client legal fees in the amount of. She consulted some papers, $5,000. Mrs. Peterson, let this be a lesson about the importance of honoring contracts and treating service providers with respect. I walked out of that courtroom feeling vindicated, but the story wasn't quite over yet. In February, I got a call from Patricia Jennings. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Tyler, I wanted you to know that Sharon has been removed as HOA president. Really? The snow disaster was the last straw. When people found out she had driven you away and then tried to sue you, and it cost the HOA $5,000 in legal fees, there was a revolt. We held a special election and she was voted out. Robert is the new president. Good for you all, I guess. There's more. We've been looking into Sharon's management of the HOA finances, and we found some irregularities. My interest piqued. What kind of irregularities? Missing money. A lot of missing money. We brought in a forensic accountant, and it looks like Sharon had been skimming from the HOA reserves for almost 2 years. We're talking about $60,000. I let out a low whistle. That's serious. We've contacted the police. They're investigating. I thought you'd want to know, given everything that happened. I thanked Patricia for calling and hung up. Part of me felt satisfied that Sharon's karma had caught up with her, but mostly I just felt tired of the whole situation. The police investigation moved slowly. Spring came, and I settled into my new life in Montana. I loved my job, loved my small house with no HOA, loved the freedom of not having to deal with Sharon Peterson and her constant demands. I had even started dating someone, a woman named Victoria Martinez who worked at the local library. In April, Patricia called again. Sharon's been arrested. The police found evidence she had created fake vendor invoices and had been writing checks to herself. It wasn't just HOA money either. She had apparently done the same thing to her employer. She's facing multiple felony charges. Wow. I know. It's been crazy here. The whole neighborhood is in shock. Some people stood by her for a while, but the evidence was overwhelming. Tyler, I want to apologize. We should have listened to you. We should have stood up to Sharon when she started making unreasonable demands. If we had, none of this would have happened. Patricia, you couldn't have known she was embezzling. No, but we knew she was being unfair to you. We chose the easy path of going along with her instead of doing the right thing. I'm sorry. After we hung up, I told Victoria about the whole saga. We were sitting on my back porch watching the sun set over the mountains. That's insane, she said. I mean, I've heard HOA horror stories, but that's next level. The funny thing is, if she had just left well enough alone, I probably would have kept plowing for another winter or two. I might have even stayed in Colorado. Her own demands and unreasonableness set off a chain of events that led to her downfall. Do you regret how it all played out? I thought about it. No, I'm actually grateful. If Sharon hadn't pushed me to quit, I never would have made the changes I needed to make. I'm happier here, making more money, living in a place where I'm not constantly dealing with petty rules and power-hungry board members. And I never would have met you. Victoria smiled. So Sharon Peterson accidentally did you a favor. In the worst possible way, yeah. The criminal case against Sharon moved forward through the summer. I didn't follow it closely, but Patricia kept me updated. Sharon tried to claim the HOA money was payment for extra administrative work she had done. When that didn't fly, she tried to blame her husband, saying he had taken the money without her knowledge. The prosecutors weren't buying any of it. The evidence was too clear. In September, nearly a year after I had quit, Sharon Peterson pleaded guilty to multiple counts of embezzlement and fraud. She was sentenced to 4 years in prison and ordered to pay back everything she had stolen, plus penalties. Her husband filed for divorce immediately after the sentencing. Patricia called me one last time after the sentencing. "It's finally over. The neighborhood is healing. We have a new board, new policies, and we found a decent snow plowing service that we treat with respect. I just wanted you to know that your stand against Sharon, even though it seemed like just a labor dispute at the time, ended up exposing something much worse. You should feel proud of that." "I just wanted to be treated fairly," I said. "I never intended to blow up anyone's life." "You didn't. Sharon did that to herself. You just refused to be complicit in her toxic behavior. That took courage." After that call, I finally felt like I could close that chapter of my life completely. I had moved on, built a new life, and found happiness. The Mountain Ridge HOA saga had taught me valuable lessons about standing up for myself, knowing my worth, and not tolerating people who tried to take advantage of me. Victoria and I got engaged in October. We were planning a small wedding for the following spring. Life was good. I had a job I loved, a woman I adored, and a home that was truly mine, with no HOA to dictate how I lived. Sometimes, late at night, I thought about that morning when Sharon had shown up in my driveway with her ridiculous demands. What if I had just agreed? What if I had swallowed my pride and started plowing at 4:30 in the morning? I would probably still be in Colorado, miserable and overworked, enabling Sharon's tyrannical behavior while she continued to steal from the neighborhood. Instead, by choosing to walk away, I had inadvertently set in motion a series of events that exposed corruption, freed a neighborhood from a toxic leader, and completely transformed my own life for the better. The snow came early to Montana that year. In November, we got our first big storm. I watched it fall outside my window with a cup of coffee in my hand, feeling nothing but peaceful contentment. No one was demanding I go out and plow. No one was sending me lists of complaints. No one was threatening to fine me for not meeting arbitrary standards. I thought about the people of Mountain Ridge, probably watching the snow fall too, hoping their new plow service would show up on time. I thought about Sharon, sitting in a prison cell, probably still believing she had done nothing wrong. I thought about how one moment, one decision to stand up for myself had changed everything. My phone rang. It was my mom calling to check in. "Hey honey, how are you handling the snow up there?" "Just fine, Mom, just watching it fall." "Are you happy there? Really happy?" I looked around my living room at the life Victoria and I were building together, at the freedom I had found. "Yeah, Mom, I really am. Good. You deserve it after everything that HOA put you through." After we hung up, I walked outside onto my porch. The snow was falling steadily, covering everything in a blanket of white. It was beautiful and peaceful, and for the first time in years, I felt completely free. No demands, no complaints, no power-hungry board president trying to control my life. I had learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. Not out of cowardice, but out of self-respect. Some battles aren't worth fighting, some places aren't worth staying, and some people will never appreciate what you do for them. The key is recognizing when you've reached that point and having the courage to move on. Sharon Peterson had demanded I plow before dawn, treating me like her personal servant rather than a neighbor providing a service. So I quit and left town without a replacement, which she had thought would force me to come crawling back. Instead, it freed me from her toxicity and inadvertently exposed her crimes. She had thought she held all the power, but in the end, I held the most important power of all, which is the power to say no and walk away. Winter deepened in Montana, and I settled into new routines. My job at the warehouse was going well, and I had been given more responsibility. Victoria and I spent weekends exploring the area, hiking when the weather allowed, or staying in by the fire when it didn't. Life had a simple, uncomplicated rhythm that I had never experienced in Mountain Ridge. In December, I received a package in the mail from Patricia. Inside was a card signed by several residents of my old neighborhood, thanking me for my years of service and apologizing for how I had been treated. There was also a check for $500 with a note explaining that the new HOA board wanted to pay me for the hassle of the lawsuit. I was touched by the gesture, even though it couldn't undo what had happened. Christmas came and went. Victoria and I celebrated with her family in Bozeman, a warm and welcoming group who treated me like I had always been part of their family. It was such a stark contrast to the cold, suspicious atmosphere that had pervaded Mountain Ridge, where neighbors were always watching for HOA violations, and no one trusted anyone else. In January, I got an unexpected call from a reporter at a Colorado newspaper. "Mr. Walsh, I'm doing a story about HOA abuses of power, and your case with Sharon Peterson keeps coming up. Would you be willing to talk to me?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to just let it all fade into the past. But another part of me thought about other people who might be dealing with similar situations, feeling trapped and powerless. "Sure," I said. "I'll talk to you." The interview lasted about an hour. I told the reporter everything that the demands Sharon had made, my decision to quit, the storm, the lawsuit, and the eventual discovery of her embezzlement. The reporter was particularly interested in the connection between my departure and the exposure of Sharon's crimes. "If you hadn't quit and forced the HOA to look more closely at their finances, they might never have discovered what she was doing," the reporter said. "I never thought about it that way. I just wanted to be treated fairly." Sometimes that's all it takes, one person standing up and saying no. The article came out in February, part of a larger series about HOA corruption and abuse of power across Colorado. My story was featured prominently, along with several others. The series sparked discussions in the state legislature about HOA reform and oversight. Several bills were introduced to give homeowners more protections and to require better financial transparency from HOA boards. Patricia called after the article came out. "You're famous," she said, sounding amused. "Everyone's talking about it." "Some people are saying you should run for state legislature." I laughed. "No thanks. I'm happy where I am, but I'm glad if my story helps other people." It already has. I've had 3 neighbors from other subdivisions call me asking about how we reformed our HOA after Sharon left. People are inspired. After we hung up, Victoria came over and sat next to me on the couch. "You okay? This is bringing up a lot of old stuff." "I'm fine. Actually, I'm better than fine. It feels good to know that something positive came out of that whole mess. If my experience helps even one person stand up to an abusive HOA, it was worth it." She kissed my cheek. "You're a good man, Tyler Walsh." Spring arrived, bringing with it wedding preparations. Victoria and I had decided on a small ceremony in April, just family and close friends. No stress, no drama, just 2 people who loved each other making a commitment. In March, I got one final call related to the Mountain Ridge saga. It was Robert Jennings, the new HOA president. "Tyler, I wanted to give you an update. Sharon's restitution payments have started coming in." We've recovered about 40% of what she stole so far. The HOA is back on solid financial footing. We've also completely rewritten our bylaws to prevent this kind of thing from happening again. That's great, Robert. There's something else. We've renamed the neighborhood park. It's now Walsh Park in recognition of your service and your integrity. We're having a small dedication ceremony next month. We'd love it if you could come. I was genuinely moved. I appreciate that, but I'm getting married in April. I don't think I can make it. We heard about that. Congratulations. Well, the park will be here whenever you want to visit. And Tyler, thank you. Thank you for having the courage to stand up for what was right, even when it was hard. Our wedding day was perfect. Clear skies, warm weather, and surrounded by people who loved us. Victoria looked beautiful in a simple white dress, and I felt like the luckiest man alive. As we exchanged vows, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. If Sharon Peterson had never made her ridiculous demands, I would never have left Colorado, never have come to Montana, never have met Victoria. In trying to control and diminish me, Sharon had inadvertently set me on a path to genuine happiness. After the ceremony, during the reception, my best friend Daniel raised a toast. To Tyler, a man who knows when to walk away and when to stand his ground. May we all have the wisdom to know the difference. Everyone raised their glasses, and I felt a profound sense of gratitude and peace. The Mountain Ridge chapter of my life was truly closed, replaced by something infinitely better. Victoria and I honeymooned in Yellowstone, taking our time exploring the park and simply enjoying being together. When we returned home, we settled into married life with the same easy rhythm that had characterized our relationship from the start. In May, I got a promotion at work, moving into a senior supervisor position with a significant pay raise. The timing was perfect because Victoria was pregnant. We had found out just before the wedding but had kept it quiet, wanting to savor the news ourselves before sharing it with the world. As summer arrived and Victoria's belly grew, I often reflected on how dramatically my life had changed in less than 2 years. I had gone from being an overworked, underappreciated contractor, dealing with an abusive HOA, to being a happily married man with a baby on the way, a job I loved, and a home that was truly my own. In July, I received a letter from the Colorado Attorney General's office. They were conducting a statewide investigation into HOA governance and financial practices, inspired partly by the newspaper series that had featured my story. They wanted to know if I would be willing to testify before a legislative committee about my experiences. I discussed it with Victoria. It would mean a trip to Denver, probably a few days. You should do it, she said without hesitation. If it helps fix a broken system, it's worth it. So in August, 7 months pregnant, Victoria accompanied me to Denver where I testified before a legislative committee studying HOA reform. I told my story again, this time to lawmakers who had the power to actually change things. I emphasized that I wasn't anti-HOA in principle, but that the current system allowed too much power to accumulate in the hands of people who weren't accountable to anyone. HOAs serve a purpose, I told the committee. But that purpose should never include giving a handful of board members the power to make unilateral decisions that dramatically affect people's lives and livelihoods. There need to be checks and balances, transparency requirements, and real consequences for board members who abuse their power. The committee members asked thoughtful questions and seemed genuinely interested in reform. Several of them shared their own HOA horror stories or stories they had heard from constituents. It was clear that the problem was widespread and that people were ready for change. After the hearing, several committee members came up to thank me personally. One of them, a state representative named Maria Rodriguez, shook my hand warmly. "Your story really resonated with people, Mr. Walsh. It put a human face on what can seem like an abstract policy issue. I think we're going to see some real changes come out of this." Victoria and I drove back to Montana feeling like we had made a difference. Even if nothing changed legislatively, at least the conversation was happening. People were talking about HOA accountability in ways they hadn't before. Our daughter, Emma, was born in September, a healthy 7-pound baby girl with her mother's dark eyes and what Victoria swore was my stubborn chin. Holding her in the hospital, I felt overwhelmed with love and responsibility. I wanted to create a world for her where people treated each other with respect, where power couldn't be abused without consequences, where standing up for yourself wasn't seen as rebellious but as basic self-respect. As fall arrived and we adjusted to life as new parents, I got a call from Representative Rodriguez. "I wanted you to be the first to know. We've drafted a comprehensive HOA reform bill, and it's got strong bipartisan support. We're calling it the Homeowner Protection Act. It includes provisions for financial transparency, limits on board authority, mandatory arbitration for disputes, and real penalties for board members who abuse their power or engage in financial misconduct." That's incredible. A lot of it came from your testimony and the testimony of others like you. This bill is going to pass, Tyler. It's going to become law, and it's going to protect thousands of homeowners from going through what you went through. The bill passed in November and was signed into law by the governor in December. I watched the signing ceremony online, Victoria sitting next to me with Emma asleep in her arms. "You did that," Victoria said softly. "You changed the law. I just told my story. Sometimes that's all it takes." One person being honest about their experience, refusing to be silent about injustice. In January, Patricia called one last time. "I don't know if you heard, but Sharon's up for parole in a few months. The HOA board has been asked to submit a statement. We wanted to know your thoughts." I thought about it carefully. "I'm not interested in revenge, Patricia. Sharon hurt me, but she hurt herself more. Whatever happens with her parole is between her and the justice system. I've moved on, and I hope she has too." "That's very gracious of you. It's not grace. It's just recognizing that holding on to anger doesn't serve anyone. I'm happy now, truly happy. I hope someday Sharon can be too, though probably not as an HOA president." Patricia laughed. "Definitely not as an HOA president. The new law would prevent her from serving on any HOA board even after she gets out of prison." After we hung up, I went into Emma's nursery and watched her sleep. She was almost 4 months old now, growing fast, already showing signs of her personality. I thought about the world she would grow up in, hopefully one where the reforms we had fought for would protect her and others from the kind of abuse I had experienced. I had learned so much from the Mountain Ridge experience. I had learned that standing up for yourself matters, even when it's hard. I had learned that walking away from a bad situation isn't weakness, it's wisdom. I had learned that sometimes the consequences of our actions ripple out in ways we never expect, changing not just our own lives but the lives of others. Most importantly, I had learned that no amount of money or convenience is worth sacrificing your self-respect. When Sharon Peterson demanded I plow before dawn with no additional compensation, treating me like her personal servant, I could have swallowed my pride and complied. Instead, I chose to honor myself and my worth. That choice had been frightening at the time, stepping into the unknown, leaving behind the familiar even when the familiar was toxic. But that choice had led me here, to this life I loved, with a wife I adored and a daughter I would protect with everything I had. It had led to legal reforms that would help others. It had led to personal growth and peace I never could have found if I had stayed and accepted poor treatment. Winter came again to Montana, and with it snow. I watched it fall outside my window, Emma in my arms, Victoria beside me. The snow was beautiful, peaceful, and for the first time in my life, completely unconnected to stress or obligation. It was just snow, just weather, just another part of the natural rhythm of life. "What are you thinking about?" Victoria asked. "How grateful I am. For you, for Emma, for this life. For having the courage to walk away when I needed to. I'm glad you did. Otherwise, I never would have met you." I kissed the top of her head. Best decision I ever made. The snow continued to fall, and inside our home we were warm and safe and together. Somewhere in Colorado, Sharon Peterson was in prison, facing the consequences of her actions. Somewhere in Mountain Ridge, the neighborhood was functioning better under new leadership and new laws. And here in Montana, I was living proof that sometimes the best response to impossible demands is simply to say no and walk away. My story had started with an unreasonable HOA president making unreasonable demands. It had ended with legal reform, personal happiness, and the knowledge that standing up for yourself matters. The journey from that cold morning in Sharon's driveway to this warm evening in my Montana home had been unexpected, sometimes difficult, but ultimately worthwhile. I had quit when they demanded I plow before dawn. I had left town without providing a replacement. And in doing so, I had found my way to exactly where I was supposed to be. Sometimes walking away isn't giving up. Sometimes it's the bravest thing you can do. Sometimes it's the only way to find your path to happiness. Emma stirred in my arms, making the soft sounds babies make when they're dreaming. I wondered what she was dreaming about, what kind of life she would build for herself. I hoped she would grow up knowing her worth, knowing when to fight and when to walk away, knowing that her happiness mattered as much as anyone else's expectations. The snow continued to fall outside, blanketing Montana in white, and inside, my family slept peacefully. I stayed up a while longer, watching the snow, feeling grateful for the journey that had brought me here. Sharon Peterson had tried to control me, to diminish me, to force me into compliance with her unreasonable demands. Instead, she had inadvertently freed me, set me on a path to a better life, and sparked changes that would protect countless others. I finally understood what people meant when they talked about things working out for the best. Not because everything had been easy, but because I had been true to myself even when it was hard. I had honored my worth even when others tried to diminish it. I had walked away when staying would have destroyed me, and in the end, that had made all the difference.